Okay, welcome back to Talkin Knicks. We are officially back. We had some tech issues, but those are now solved. We even have a YouTube page now where we'll be putting full shows and episode highlights. But the point is, we're here. The Knicks are playing basketball games, so we're here to talk about them. Let's do it. Let's talk Knicks. All right, I'm Tom Piccolo. I'm joined by my friend and co-host Kenny Poon. Kenny, what's happening?
Hey Tom, how you doing? Good to be talking to you. I think this is our usual recording time on a Sunday, but I feel like we're earlier than normal. It's just before 11 a.m. I feel like we usually do this later in the evenings.
Yeah, no, you're
So
right. We
I
uh we we should say we are recording this segment of the show on Sunday before the Cavaliers game. We will have a different segment reacting to that game. And if you're listening to this, you might have just listened to that already. But this discussion is going to be more of a kind of State of the Union, big picture, start of the season show. Um, and yeah, so I mean, the Knicks right now are 3-2 as we're speaking. But listeners will know whether the team is now 500 or 4-2. But either way, yeah, Kenny, how you feeling to start the season?
so far, I mean, I think I have a very positive feeling about the season. I think you and I talked offline about I feel like there's a lot of kind of uh a little reactionary. Every time the Knicks win, people are really pumped up, and every time the Knicks lose, people are really down and critical about it. But overall, like the Knicks won the three games you would have wanted them to win, and they lost the two games you thought they would probably lose. So like I can't be too upset about it, you know? How about you, Tom?
Yeah, I think in terms of the strictly the results, it's hard to complain, right? They like you said, they won the games they were supposed to win, all three at home, which you love to see because last year the Knicks were actually a worse home team than they were an away team. So it's good to see them defending the Garden, especially against lesser opponents. I think that if you were to sort of put the results aside and just kind of look at the process of each game, maybe there's some nits to pick, and I'm sure we'll get into them. But I mean, we can go through it real quick. Just the Knicks lost the season opener 112 to 115 in overtime in Memphis to the Memphis Grizzlies. That was a Grizzlies team that didn't have Jaren Jackson Jr. They didn't have Dylan Brooks. They're a little banged up, but either way, they still had John Morant, right? They still had some very good players. So I think the fact that they're able to take them to overtime and kind of narrowly lose there is tough to complain about, to your point. And then came the three-game winning streak at home. You had the 130-106 win versus Detroit in the home opener, a 115-102 win versus the Orlando Magic, who did they get their first win last night? They might have. They were winless when we played them, but they've been frisky. Like they've definitely been competitive in the games they've played. They're now 1-5, so yep, they finally got that elusive first win. And then there was a 134-131 victory versus a very depleted Charlotte Hornets team in overtime. You could have some qualms that it took overtime to beat that version of the Charlotte Hornets, but I mean, a win is a win, as we know. And then the 108-119 loss to the Bucks that I think was actually, it was, even though the Knicks remained competitive, they never really challenged to win that game. It never really felt like it was in doubt, having watched it. But yeah, so Kenny, I'm curious, of those five games I just mentioned, which one do you think we learned the most from?
I know that you just moments ago said that the people might have qualms about the Charlotte win. But I think towards the end of that game, you saw something that you didn't see from the Knicks last year. There was a point where they were down, I think, five with probably less than 2 minutes to go. And in previous years, you would have thought, all right, that's it. They're not coming back from this. They had, I believe, had the lead for most of the game, and then Charlotte took a 5 point lead. And I personally like being a Knicks fan, I know from history that that probably doesn't end well. But the Knicks, they came back from that 5 point deficit to force overtime, and then they won in overtime, which is a huge difference from prior years. And I think a big part of that is kind of the steady play of Jalen Brunson at point guard. He was such a big part of that, hitting he hit a big. I think he hit the game tying three, and he had a lot of big plays in overtime and down the stretch in terms of setting the team up. I know in overtime he had that very nice assist to Mitchell Robinson, just wide open under the basket, and that's something again that the Knicks haven't had in a very long time. And having that calming presence when kind of things are kind of going awry is huge. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that kind of plays out over the course of the season.
Yeah, man, you nailed it. Like that even though I kind of played devil's advocate, sort of downplaying that Charlotte win a little bit, that's the one I identified too as the most important win so far in the season. And to your point, it's because of Jalen Brunson. There were points. I mean, flat out, the Knicks last year were the worst crunch time team in the league statistically. That was a team that fell apart whenever the chips were down. They didn't have someone you could trust to go get a bucket, to go create offense for themselves or others. And this year is entirely different. That's the biggest shift that we've seen in this team from last year to this year. There was a point in that Charlotte game in crunch time when the Hornets went to get the ball out of Brunson's hands and they trapped him off a pick and roll. And Brunson did give it up at one point, and it turned out very poorly for the Knicks. No one else was really able to capitalize on that. But the next time that happened, I mean, Brunson's smart, man. He learns, and you identified the play exactly. It was the one where he beat the trap, and then he looked off a defender and hit Mitchell Robinson for a dunk, just a wide open dunk that it's just not something. It's not the kind of offense that the Knicks have been able to create in the game's biggest moments in the past. And that was 100% Jalen Brunson being crafty, being just so skilled. I know, I mean, we've talked about it before, but like his handle is impeccable. And I think the fact that he's, so steady and doesn't turn the ball over, I'd say kind of that Bucks game, a little notwithstanding, we can get into that a little bit, sort of when the competition ratchets up. But that Hornets game to me was, I think you're right on, the most encouraging thing I've seen.
And I think just one thing to add to when talking about that play, that assist to Mitchell Robinson is, going back to your point about how smart he is. The double team came from Plumlee, and so Plumlee came to double team at like half court, and Brunson, knowing that he had the ability to get around that, got around that, and Plumlee, who would have been guarding Mitchell Robinson, and so Gordon Hayward ended up on Robinson. So even if he didn't look Hayward off to the corner where I think Cam Reddish would have been open for a wide open three, it would have been Mitchell Robinson with Hayward on his back on the other side of the basket. So like he would, regardless, Mitchell Robinson still would have had a wide open dunk. And that all stems from the fact that Brunson was able to identify that Plumlee came out on the double and he had the ability to get around him and beat him to the basket. So that again is just something that we haven't seen, that kind of creativity and basketball IQ at the point guard position in who knows how long.
Yeah, and I think you saw a lot of that in that Orlando game. I know immediately following that game, a lot of people were saying this is a game that the Knicks would have lost last year. Someone who couldn't sort of stem the tide when the Magic were making a run in the fourth quarter. And, Jalen Brunson sort of did that 2 games in a row, culminating in that Charlotte win. But, I will say the most recent game that you and I have seen is that Milwaukee Bucks game. And that was more of a struggle for him. I think that when you have guys like Drew Holiday and the other point guard,
Carter.
Thank you, Carter, for the Bucks. I mean, those guys are elite defenders at the point of attack, and they're kind of exactly the sort of players that Brunson struggles with, where they have a little bit more length, but they're also very strong, right? Because Brunson, as we know, gets to his spots, he bumps guys, gets them off balance. He has a hard time doing that against bigger guys like Carter and Holiday. And I think that showed, that was sort of the first game that we saw Brunson kind of look shaky. What did you make of that?
And again, I think a lot of people were pretty down after the Bucks game, but like I saw it as just an off game, and there were some weird things that happened in that game, including both Jalen Brunson missed 3 free throws, which is very out of character, and Emmanuel quickly missed 2 out of 4. So I chalked that up to kind of just an off game, and I agree that the level of the defense stepped up with Holiday and Carter, but at the same time, I'm not putting too much stock into one game, especially when, the fact that those guys, and I don't know if I'm using this as too much of an excuse, but the fact that those guys missed those free throws tell me that just something was off that game. Just because those guys are such knockdown free throw shooters. So like again, like one game, fam, I'm not as worried about it. I don't think that there's too much that we can take away from it, and I'm more encouraged by the kind of culmination of what happened in the prior games than getting anything out of this one single game against, again, the only undefeated team still in the NBA, and one of the best teams in the NBA, regardless. And the Knicks, as you said, they didn't really challenge, but they kept it close and they kept it interesting. And at no point was Milwaukee completely out of reach. So again, I'm not taking too much negative out of this game, other than it wasn't their best night. Maybe it was because of the Bucks, maybe it was because of something else. But again, I look at the free throws just because those are unguarded. It's kind of the same every game, and the fact that happened for two of our best free throw shooters, it just tells me something was a little off.
Yeah, I think that's the key, is like who was taking those free throws. Because last year, as we know, the Knicks were, I think, bottom 5 or bottom 6 in the league in free throw percentage. And that's because guys like, RJ Barrett struggled from the line for much of the season. Mitch was atrocious last year at the line. Even Julius Randle, I think, may have even had a career low at the free throw line. So there was some odd stuff going on there. But, Brunson and Quickly are just guys you expect to make their free throws. Not to say that the Knicks would have won that game had they made their free throws. There was a lot more to it than that. But, this was not only are they like the best team in the league, they're 5-0, the Bucks. They also have the best defense in the league. They were giving up just 102.6 points per 100 possessions. That's best by a pretty wide margin. Because it's not like,
and the Knicks were over that, by the way.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know that was normalized for 100 possessions. So I'm not.
Well, I know going into that game, they said the Bucks were only giving up, like, I think right around there, the 102
Gotcha.
mark. So regardless, I think the Knicks were above whatever the Bucks were giving up per game.
Yeah. And it's not like we mentioned, Carter and Holiday, but it's not like their back line is a bunch of slouches, right? They've got Giannis back there. They've got Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis. They're absolutely huge. They actually destroyed us on the glass, which is not something you expect, because the Knicks, that's kind of a forte of the Knicks team. But there were 19 offensive rebounds by the Bucks, 8 of those by Bobby Portis in 25 minutes. That's pretty wild. So, there were definitely some rebounding issues in that game. It wasn't all, free throw line stuff. I think the Knicks also really struggled from the 3-point line. Actually not, let me see here. Looks like
I think they shot pretty well.
34%. I should be more specific when I say, RJ Barrett shot 1 of 7 from 3, Jalen Brunson 1 of 4, Julius Randle 0 of 2. So that's 2 of 13 from our 3 highest usage guys. That's an issue. The bench shot the ball really well, but yeah, that kind of takes me to the next guy I want to talk about, which is Julius Randle. He came into the season as a major question mark. He was really good 2 years ago. He was really bad last year. And so I think that the question is kind of, what Julius Randle have you seen so far? Has it been mostly good, mostly bad, kind of an even distribution of both, or what are you looking at?
Man, it's so hard to say, just because, like you said, prior years he has been either very good or very bad. And so far this season, like, I have seen a lot of the good. If I'm being honest with you, he's hit a lot of the shots that he made 2 years ago but missed last year. Those kind of mid range jumpers, and kind of dribble into the paint, and maybe a little bit of a fadeaway. So those moves he's been hitting a little bit. But there's also been some just really bad ISOs that he's tried to force, and he doesn't have to. So it's hard to say. And there's also been a couple of games where he's played very much within the offenses. He's let Jalen Brunson kind of handle things on his own. So, like, I think the jury's still out. I don't really have a strong feeling, which is, I know, a big cop out, but after 5 games, I don't know if we have the answers to these questions, just because I've seen a little bit of good and a little bit of bad, and it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out throughout the season.
Yeah, and that might just be kind of a more that's kind of more who he is as a player. It's more representative of him as a player. Like he's probably not that second team all NBA guy. I think that was, he got hot. It was a shortened season. I also don't think he's as bad as he showed last year. It probably will end up being somewhere in the middle. To your point, he has shown that he's playing a little differently in terms of hustling down court. Like he's making plays, he's making unselfish plays, he's getting back on defense. There's been some very encouraging signs there, things that we didn't necessarily see last year. He's pushing the ball, making it a point to really, grab and go versus sort of slowly walking it up and getting into the offense really late and sort of putting the offense behind the eight ball. Um, he's kind of a tricky player to analyze because there are so many ups and downs. I think that, a couple things. Offensively, he isn't shooting quite as many mid-rangers. There's still some of the head-scratching ones. To your point, he went ISO on Giannis in this game, where it's just like that's not good offense for anybody in the league, let alone you, Julius Randle. So let's kind of leave that behind. But there's also, kind of one funny thing that I think is actually a good sign is that his assist percentage is down. He's not assisting on nearly as many of the Knicks made field goals as he has in years past. And to your point, that's because he is deferring to Jalen Brunson. The offense isn't entirely running through him. So he's not getting these kind of inflated assist totals that, don't necessarily lead to winning basketball, though they will look good in a stat sheet. He is playing more within the concept of the team. And I'm hoping to see that continue because even though his jump shot's not really falling right now, I think he's shooting just dreadfully from three. He's making 27% of his threes on the season on about 4.5 attempts per game. So pretty decent volume there. I think that's going to tick up. I think jump shots are going to start falling, and that new sort of mindset, this sort of team first mindset, is going to really show through at that point.
Yeah, and one other thing I want to point out is like I know a lot of I feel like I saw a lot on Twitter of people who were just kind of very negative about his game against Milwaukee and kind of to your point the ISO against Giannis, but it's worth pointing out that he only took 10 shots in that game, which last year would have been definitely towards the lower end of the spectrum in terms of shots he got up. So I think that's just a recognition that he didn't have the matchup, and because he didn't have the matchup, he deferred to other players to get those shots rather than forcing them. Although, like we said, there were a couple of those situations where he did force them, and I know a couple of his attempts did come on offensive rebounds and things like that. So it was all very much, well, not all of it, but most of it was very much within the offense, which I think is an encouraging sign, even though he only shot 3 of 10.
Yeah, and I think we should point out that like Knicks fans didn't turn on Julius Randle because he was missing shots last year. That was, like I think RJ Barrett misses a lot of shots, and we'll get to him shortly. But I think that it had more to do with kind of the attitude or the mentality. And part of that showed through on defense last year. It didn't look like the effort was always there. I think it was not there more often than not. I think this year you're seeing a player who is a little bit more engaged. I think that a lot of people point this out on Twitter, whether it's Dallas Amico from the Strickland or Benji Ritholtz from Knicks Film School. Julius Randle is not good in drop coverage. Like that's just splitting the difference between I'm talking about when a pick and roll happens and he has to kind of contain the ball handler while also keeping in mind his rolling big man behind him. That's something that Mitchell Robinson is elite at. He has the length and kind of the instincts for it. Julius Randle does not. Julius Randle is a player who needs to be switching more often. He is quick on his feet comparatively. He's able to stay with ball handlers. And so he's being asked to do something that he's objectively not good at. And I think that has really kind of hurt his just the way he looks defensively. The other thing is it's been kind of bizarre because even when he's in the right position this year, he's really not contesting shots at the rim. I just looked it up on NBA.com. He's guarding 4 shots per game at the rim and giving up 95% field goal percentage, which is by far the worst in the league. he's keeping his arms down and like not really contesting at the rim. So that I think is hopefully something they're going to clean up, because that's sort of just like an effort thing. Um, and that's kind of been my biggest complaint of his so far, is just on the back line, he's really struggled.
And
But
I'll jump in defense of Julius Randle here. Like 95% is not a number that will sustain throughout the season. So I think we can kind of give that a small sample size exclusion. I think that number will come down. But also, Julius Randle, to your point, is not a shot blocker throughout his entire career. The highest he ever averages 0.6 blocks per game. So he's not a shot blocker. He's not going to be great defending around the rim. To your what you're saying before, like I think he is more of he has to use his strength to prevent people from getting to the rim. But in terms of the effort point you made, there, in addition to kind of the clip you're talking about him in drop coverage, there's also been clips of him just running the floor, even if there's no benefit to him. So I forget who clipped it. It might have been something from Tommy Beer or something like that. But there was one play where you see him run on offense during the fast break, someone else gets the bucket, and then he sprinted back on defense to get back before the offense had a chance to set up. And that's something, again, that we didn't really see last year. There was a lot of kind of him complaining if things didn't go his way and moping in the backcourt and then taking his time getting back. And so far this season, I think that has not really been the case. We can argue about how good his defense has been, but I think he has been, at least putting in the hustle to get to his spots when he needs to.
yeah, and the biggest thing has been that attitude. We're seeing him laugh and smile and interact with his teammates. There's not so much of like a kind of a dour cloud hanging over him and sort of infecting his teammates like it did last season. Like this year, he seems to be like embracing a more leadership role, and it's been very encouraging to see. And so even though the shots haven't really been dropping so far this season, I think that is more small sample size stuff, and those, especially the shots from three, like those numbers are going to tick up, and he's going to look like a much better player, and certainly much better player than he was last year. And that's a helpful player. That's I don't know if it's the best player on this team, but it's right up there and a very valuable piece. So I think kind of along those lines, kind of going off of slow starts, I think that maybe the biggest concern right now that Knicks fans have has been RJ Barrett's slow start. He's someone who just secured a decent contract. It was far from the max, but it was over $100 million. He started slow. Like he's looked bad on offense. He's looked at times selfish. He's taking over 5.5 threes per game and shooting 14% on those. I mean, that's about as bad as it gets. His drives haven't looked all that much better. In preseason, it looked like he had really improved his touch. His three ball looked great, and then the season started, and things have really gone south. He's not assisting on nearly as many drives as he has in the past, and overall, like defensively, he hasn't even been that engaged either. There was kind of a report going around. I don't know the validity of it. It was reported by heavy.com. So, take it with a grain of salt, but that people around the team or people around RJ Barrett were pointing to Barrett needing to defend the opposing team's best perimeter player, especially because of Evan Fournier and Jalen Brunson not being the best defenders. That RJ Barrett had to step into this new defensive stopper role, and that was impacting his offensive play. I don't buy that for even a moment. But we'll see when Grimes comes back. Hopefully he comes back into the starting five. But we'll talk about that in a moment. But Kenny, talk me down on RJ Barrett, or maybe you're with me that this actually has been a pretty concerning start.
Again, it's a small sample size, man. A few years ago, I feel like it was like an 0 for 32 start from three or something like that from or maybe it was an 0 for 32 stretch from RJ Barrett early in the season. He has done this historically from three, so I'm not worried about that. I think eventually he comes around because he has proven in the past that he is a better shooter than he does in these kind of early season streaks. What's far more concerning to me is the not being able to finish at the rim, because I think that has been something that he's done in the past. It's something that he said he worked on this off season, and it's something that he definitely needs to be able to do. Just because that is his game. Like, he gets to the rim, and then he gets occasionally he gets wide open threes, and if he can't hit the wide open threes, and if he can't get to the rim and finish the bucket, then it's going to be a problem for him. Um, Again, I to your point on the heavy.com thing, I don't buy that at all. I feel like for large stretches of last season, he was also guarding the other team's best perimeter defender, and he was very good last year through long stretches. So that was a big nothing to me, and I think in Macri's one of his daily messages or emails or newsletters is what they're called. He mentioned that and basically said that, like, whatever the source was, they mentioned that, like, it was not connected to the team at all. It was just some person who, like, had this speculation that might know someone on the team. Like, whatever it was very clear that it didn't really, like, the source was not a legitimate source. So I'm not going to buy into that at all.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Not even probably not even worth bringing up, but I think that if you were to try and make an excuse for RJ Barrett, you could try and point to that. Like, he was defending John Morant a good amount in that first game. He was not defending Cade Cunningham. They actually put Jalen Brunson on Cade Cunningham in that game, but he was. I mean, he's had to guard faster players, and I think it's hard to argue that that's the case. But I don't know, if you want to look for something encouraging, he is shooting close to 80% on nearly 5 free throws a game, and he's hit some really clutch ones. In that Charlotte game, he had an opportunity to do a dribble handoff with Jalen Brunson, who was going to get fouled. He held on to it instead, whether that was the right decision or not, but he knocked down both free throws, and so he kind of vindicated himself there. So that's encouraging, because that's another area where he really needed to improve year over year. He was down closer to 70% last year, and he gets to the line a lot. To your point, he's always putting his head down and driving. But you can tell that it's gotten to him a little bit, that he has not been converting. You could see some of his reactions, even when his misses are cleaned up by, like, a Mitch or a Hartenstein. He's still, like, very frustrated with himself when he's missing these free throw or these bunnies, frankly. So I guess the thing is, Kenny, like, I don't want to overreact to it, but the frustrating part is just in year 4, you're gonna hope for just a little bit more consistency. In early years, I think you can get away with, like, oh, it's a slow start. He's still young, and he is still young. He's 22 years old, but by year 4, you're hoping that you just start to see more consistency from this guy, and you're gonna know what you're gonna get game to game, and he's just not quite there yet. And I think fans are justifiably frustrated. I don't think that I don't think he's going to continue at this level, or I don't think he's a negative player on the season. But it's hard to, I mean, through 5 games, he has unquestionably been a negative player. He's hurt the team's chances of winning, and it's not how you want to see your young stud begin the year.
Yeah, and again, like, I'm gonna cop out behind it's only been 5 games things, and I think you're right. I think over the course of the season he will be better. But I'm not gonna fault anyone for being frustrated with how he's played so far, because I'm frustrated that when he misses layups, I'm frustrated when he misses wide open threes. I just don't think that is going to continue throughout the season, where it's going to be this ineffective, because it just can't. It's not. I don't think it's possible.
Yeah, so we can move to the next guy, the other guy we paid from last year's team, and that's Mitchell Robinson. I'm curious what you've thought of his start so far, if he's kind of played up to his contract, whether yeah, you think that was money well spent, or if the center market can be. We've got a guy in Jericho Sims, for example, who we also signed to a proper NBA contract, who's just kind of chilling on the bench, getting 0 minutes in the rotation. Isaiah Hartenstein coming off the bench, playing a lot of minutes. So how have you felt about Mitchell Robinson so far?
I feel like when Mitchell Robinson is on the court, he has been a very positive player. I think his ability to grab offensive rebounds and just generally grab rebounds in traffic against other teams is tops in the league. He's has to be at the towards the top of the league in terms of his ability to get contested rebounds. The problem is, and it's been a problem for him in the past, not so much last year, is like he just hasn't been able to stay on the court early in a lot of these games. I think he got in foul trouble in at least two of these games in the first half, and because of that, his minutes have been down, and I think it really hurts the team in some instances when he's not in. I think I don't know if we're going to talk about Hartenstein at some point, but he's been very good, but at the same time, he's not Mitchell Robinson when it comes to his ability to put pressure on the defense on the offensive boards or to put to block shots on the defensive end. I think going into yesterday, I think he was second, or going into the Milwaukee game, he was second to Brook Lopez in blocks per game, and that's just those are things that a Tibbs team is built on, like specifically having a shot blocker in the center to funnel the offense towards. And I have been very encouraged by his play and kind of I know he's talked a lot about after he got the contract, people question whether you're still going to put in the effort, and he says he did put in the effort, and it looks like he did. He's in kind of great shape in terms of getting up and down the court. I don't think he's looked as exhausted as he did early last year. And I think, even early last year, I think the problem was that he worked out too hard to put on weight, whereas that's not really his game. I think his game is more his kind of quick twitch muscles and his ability to get up quickly and anticipate things like that. So I don't think last year's early season struggles were due to a lack of effort. I think it was just misplaced effort. Whereas this season, I think everything is very well. Everything's coming together well. It's just he has to find a way to stay on the court a little more often. And one of the biggest problems for me is that a lot of the fouls are just stupid fouls. There's been a few where he's just challenged things that he didn't need to challenge, and because of that, he's picking up some chippies.
Yeah, I think that's well said about misplaced effort last year. He does look incredible this year when he's on the floor. He looks bouncy. He looks strong. Hartenstein doesn't even compare as a rebounder. And that's why we've kind of struggled grabbing boards when Mitch is sat. It was the Memphis game. He picked up 5 fouls and only was able to play 12 minutes. That really hurt the team. That really hurt the team, especially against someone like Steven Adams, who's just a monster. And then versus Milwaukee, he was being asked to do something pretty much impossible for him, and that's guard Giannis to start the game. I know he wanted that assignment. He wants to think of himself as that. I think Mike Breen said that he thinks of himself as like a defensive player of the year candidate. And if you're going to do that, you better defend the opposing team's best big. And so he wanted to start on Giannis, and that didn't really pan out. First of all, Giannis, he does get calls. This guy is a multiple-time MVP. If there's contact, Giannis is going to see a lot of whistles. You know what I mean? So like whether all those were fouls or not, I think is maybe even questionable, but you have to expect that game planning for Milwaukee. Is it the best use of Mitchell Robinson to have him guard Giannis on the ball, or should he be more of a help defender, which is really his strength? Like him rotating and blocking shots as an off the ball, that's what he's best at. It's not like the Knicks had a lot of great options to defend Giannis, but Julius Randle is very strong, as we've said, and he can be physical. He doesn't have the length to guard Giannis. Very few do, so it would take the whole team's effort, but having Mitchell Robinson start on him really did put him in a tough spot, and he picked up 5 fouls in just 20 minutes in that game versus Milwaukee. But in the games prior is where we saw him really shine. He played about 30 minutes and 37 minutes versus Orlando and Charlotte, respectively. And he looked just dominant. I thought he was just an absolute monster versus Orlando. He had 14 points, 3 blocks, just 6 boards, but his presence, he allows for a lot of the guards to grab rebounds. And the Knicks have been really focusing on grabbing the ball and pushing in transition. And so it just happens more with Mitchell Robinson on the floor. He's able to kind of put a body on a big, box them out, and funnel the rebounds to guards, which is hugely helpful. And then against Charlotte, he had 6 blocks, and you could just tell he impacts. I mean, guys think twice before bringing the ball to Mitchell Robinson. Like, he really changes guys' shots around the rim, and people hear footsteps. Like, even when he's not blocking shots, he's changing shots, and I've been encouraged with how he looks. I completely agree with you that he's had some just kind of, lapses in judgment and some really bad fouls. I think he had one against Brook Lopez where he just fell asleep, allowed a cut along the baseline. Brook Lopez caught the ball for a wide open layup, and there was no chance that Mitchell Robinson could contest it. He tried anyway and got the foul. And it's just not, it wasn't the time or place for that. We need him on the floor. So that'll be something for us to monitor going forward, is how well he's able to stay on the court. Yeah, I think we've been going for a while. I think last thing we should probably talk about, second unit, maybe some rotation stuff. I know people are often complaining about Tibbs rotations. I did on Twitter myself during that Milwaukee game. So I'm curious, Kenny, whether it's IQ or Obi or Derrick Rose, is there anything that has surprised you from a second unit rotation standpoint so far?
I mean, I think what has to be the most surprising thing is how few minutes Derrick Rose is playing. I don't necessarily think that it's a bad thing, just because I think he has been for his entire career, so kind of limiting his minutes and using him when best necessary, and maybe building him up a little bit to play some higher minutes in other games, I think is fine. But all of it goes back to what kind of Tibbs' MO has been throughout his career as a coach, is that he's going to play his best players as much as he possibly can. And having Jalen Brunson as one of your best players is going to limit the amount that you need Derrick Rose to be out there. And I think it's the same across the board. For however good you think that Obi Toppin is, I think it's I don't think it's very arguable that Julius Randle is the better player right now. And because of that, Julius Randle is going to get the lion's share of the minutes over Obi Toppin. That's just going to be the way it is. I'm kind of surprised that people are surprised at this point. And I'm not sure how else you handle that, because I understand the urge to play Obi Toppin some more minutes and to play Emmanuel Quickly some more minutes, but I think Quickly there's more of an argument. But for Obi Toppin, he's just he's a good player in spurts. He's been hitting his shot, which again, if that is sustainable, it's a game changer. I am not convinced yet that it is sustainable, despite the fact that he ended last year hot and he has started this year hot. If he continues it through the season, we can have another discussion about this. But after 5 games, I'm not really going to give him that benefit of the doubt, because right now no one is even challenging him at the 3-point line. And until they start to do that, then I'm not really. I don't know whether to believe in that. And because Julius Randle's the better player, because Jalen Brunson is the better player, those are the guys who are going to get the most minutes.
I think it's important to note that it's who Tom Thibodeau sees as the better player, because I mean, I know you said Emmanuel Quickly has more of a case. He's been better than Evan Fournier to start this season. Not shooting from 3. So if you're saying we just need 3-point shooting at the cost of everything else, then there's your argument for Evan Fournier, who's hitting about 37.5% on 6.4 threes per game. That's a high volume. He hits tough threes. No one's going to sit here and say Evan Fournier doesn't hit threes. The problem is that what he does on the other end and what else he does on the offensive end when he's not shooting threes has been very problematic. He's turned the ball over a lot in pick and rolls. He just hasn't looked solid with his dribble at all. I feel like it's been very loose. And his shooting from 2 is not, I mean, on the whole, he's shooting 38% from the field. That does include a high volume of threes, like I mentioned, but the problem is defensively. We saw against Milwaukee, it didn't even look like he was competing. He doesn't have the physicality. Not every team is the Milwaukee Bucks. I get that, but it is representative of Evan Fournier's style of defense. It's too much finesse and too much he'll gamble and get steals every once in a while, but it's not worth it on the other end, because he's a non-entity on defense. Whereas Emmanuel Quickly, has been very good on that end. Like he got into the passing lane several times. He's been an elite defensive rebounder at the shooting guard position, and he's starting to find his stroke a little bit. So I mean, I know I don't need to sit here and cape for Quickly. I think most fans agree that Quickly should get minutes over Fournier. But I do want to address what you're saying about Obi Toppin because Julius Randle is certainly a better player than Obi Toppin. He demands more attention from opposing defenses. He's a more versatile offensive weapon. He's a much better rebounder. Toppin, I think, struggles to box out sometimes. He did that against Milwaukee and just wouldn't grab a board. That was a huge issue. But I will say that when Toppin is playing as well as he was against Milwaukee on the offensive end, and Julius Randle was struggling as much as he was on the offensive end, like it's hard to not see a little bit of a more even distribution. Like Obi Toppin came in, hit 3 out of 5 threes, and just was playing with an energy and an effort that we've seen so many times before, where it's like, get him to 20. Like there's no real downside to getting this guy to 20 minutes. People aren't asking for Toppin to play Randle level minutes. It's just, when you see him going like that, it hurts to sit him because we know what we invested in this guy, the 8th overall pick that, picked him ahead of some very good players who were not reaches at 8. Sometimes when people do the Knicks could have had Donovan Mitchell or they could have had so-and-so, it's like, yeah, a lot of teams missed on that. But there are guys in the Obi Toppin range who we knew were in the Obi Toppin range. I'll say Halliburton, Devin Vassell, who very easily could have gone there and who are really shining in their minutes. So it's frustrating to not see Toppin get the opportunity to do the same.
Yeah, I mean, I fully understand that, and to some extent, I agree with you, but at the same time, it wasn't Tibbs who made the decision to draft Obi Toppin, so I don't think Tibbs very much cares about the draft capital. I think what he cares about is that Julius Randle is a better player, and because Julius Randle is a better player, he's gonna put him in for those minutes. And I think I feel like in prior seasons we have seen him go a little bit with a hot hand towards the end of the game, which we haven't really seen with Julius Randle. And I think that goes back to there's an argument. I think it's a weaker argument now than it's been in years past, but there's an argument that Julius Randle is your best player, and you're not going to put your best player on the bench during crunch time. You're just not. And Obi Toppin will not play with Julius Randle because they play the same position, and that's how Tibbs sees it. Like whether you can shift one of them to the 5 or maybe even go super large and have one of them play the 3, like they don't see that as a viable option. And so it's a very tough position to be in because like I just don't think you can bench Julius Randle down the stretch. Like to your point, can you give him a few extra minutes before the last few minutes? Like maybe, and I think matchups might play a little bit into that, but it's just so hard to bench your best player going down the stretch.
Well, and matchups should play a part into it. I think there should be some more flexibility depending on who you're going against. Like this Milwaukee team had a front court of Giannis, Bobby Portis, and Brook Lopez all in at the same time at points during that game. That was huge. The Knicks were getting destroyed on the glass. Maybe you do experiment a little bit because what we were doing wasn't working. Like to not remain stubborn in those moments, I think is a value, is a virtue for coaches. And if you're ever going to try Obi Randle and Mitch or Obi Randle Hartenstein, that's the time to do it, is against the opposing team when they're jumbo sized and destroying us on the glass. Yeah. So I just think that, yeah, there's definitely, I think the criticism of Tibbs is warranted, definitely to an extent. And it is matchup dependent. You can't always run that out because that's just not going to work defensively. I think in this instance it could have, but I don't know. Preseason, I took the over on Mitch over 20 minutes per game. That is making me look extraordinarily foolish, and yeah, it's a little bit of a bummer.
I very much agree with you, and again, I think I'm on the Tibbs defender here. But I very much agree with you that if you're going to run out that large lineup with both Julius Randle and Obi Toppin in the game with potentially a Mitch or a Hartenstein, that was the opportunity to do it. But I get Tibbs' hesitancy to do that because you don't want the other team to force you to do something that's not your thing. And I think that Tibbs thinks that that's not their thing, so they're going to play to their strengths and make those guys. Bobby Portis is going to have to defend someone smaller and quicker than he is, or something like that. But I can see that argument, but I agree with you that this is something that they should be trying out, and if they were going to try it out, that was the opportunity to do it.
All right, Kenny, anything else we need to hit on the Knicks side? I know we'll have some Knicks Cavs recap content, whether that was before this or after this. We'll see how BBD produces it. But anything else you want to talk about?
I mean, I feel like we're going long, but I want to just throw in a quick thing. Hartenstein, I love his effort. He puts in so much effort. He hits the floor more than any other player in the league that I've seen, which is something that you don't see from a center in particular. A lot of times, like, guards will get scrappy and hit the floor, but this as a center, like hitting the floor, everything, love the effort. And last thing, I don't know if we want to get too much into it, but Cam Reddish, the Cam Reddish question is still open as Grimes is out, and it's also, I believe, a Fournier question. And to be determined as to where these minutes go, because Tibbs said in one of the pressers, post-game pressers, that you're not going to go to a 12-man lineup. He was talking specifically about Jericho Sims and Deuce McBride not playing, and he said that you can't get that many guys into a lineup. And when Grimes comes back, you're going to have 11 guys, arguably 13 if you include McBride and Sims, who aren't playing already, that could be in the rotation. And someone is probably going to drop out, and it's unclear who that's going to be. I would guess that it's Cam Reddish, but to your point, Fournier hasn't been playing well. I think you have invested too much money in him to bench him. I think more likely he would continue to play, and maybe you would try to trade him. This is pure speculation. I know nothing. But it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out, because Cam Reddish, he's not played great in every game. He had a few very good games, but he has played well enough to make you wonder if he should be in the rotation.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on Hartenstein. He's been a joy to watch. The hustle, the floaters. He sets pretty good screens comparatively to the rest of the team. He's a great backup big. Really, really nice center off the bench. I like him in that role. Reddish, I'm gonna want to table the conversation about Reddish. I mean, there doesn't have to be a decision made yet. Grimes is still out for this Cleveland game as well. So that kind of kicks the cam down the road a little bit. That's stupid. But I do just want to see a little bit more, because he's someone who I just, night to night, I have no idea what to expect from him. He'll do something that blows your mind and then do something that boggles your mind right after it. So I just want to see a little bit more of him in this rotation before I kind of make a determination. So we can table that for next week. And yeah, Kenny, with that, we can talk quickly if there's anything else in terms of what else is on America's favorite sub podcast. I know, like you said, we are long, and I don't have much to say here, but is there anything you want to recommend to the folks?
So I do have one thing, which is, I don't know if you've ever heard of a show called Avenue 5 on HBO. I had never heard of it, and I was just looking for something to watch. I threw it on. It's got a pretty good cast, including Hugh Laurie, who was Dr. House on House. It's got Josh Gad, who is also a very famous person, and it has I'm forgetting his name, but the guy who played Gabe in The Office,
Zach Woods.
Zach Woods is also on there, and it's a comedy. It's a funny show. It's these people who go into space on it's in the future. They go into space for like an 8-week tour around some planet, and they get thrown off course. So they're out in space, caught in space for a longer period of time. And it's just about some of the shenanigans that happens there as it goes along. And it's so far it's been, quite entertaining for me. It's a nice little, nothing too deep. It's not The Good Place with a lot of deep messages, but it's got some social commentary and some good comedy. So I've really been enjoying that so far.
Yeah, I see it's created by the same guy who created Veep. So I know that's a very popular show. People love that. So it probably has a similar sensibility to that. Sounds like a good recommendation. Yeah, last thing I'll say, my wife and I we haven't watched a movie since our son was born. And so we tried to watch a movie and we're like, what kind of movie? We don't want anything heavy. Like we just want something kind of light. And so we put on this movie that came out over the summer is called Dog with Channing Tatum. Have you heard about this, Kenny?
Yep. I'm familiar with it. I
Have you
haven't
have,
seen it, but
haven't seen
I'm
it?
familiar.
And you know, we saw first of all the trailer looked kind of silly, like maybe it wasn't that good of a movie, but it's a PG-13 light comedy. And then the critics gave it, I'm looking at Rotten Tomatoes, our favorite site, 77% from critics, 89% from audience. So we're like, that's really good for almost a dumb comedy. You know, you rarely see that kind of agreement between critics and audiences. And we popped it on and watched about an hour, so over half of it, and we were like, this sucks. Like I don't know. I thought that the dog was the best actor, which was not. Like I love dogs, but it was not the best look. So much of the dialogue just felt like it was being read off a script. I couldn't get into it. I couldn't get into the characters. I was like, none of these people are acting like normal people would act, and it wasn't the type of movie, you know, like a Judd Apatow style comedy where you would never question someone's actions there because it's all so silly. This movie didn't have the same kind of framework. It was like trying to be grounded, but also here's this zany dog, and nothing really. It didn't work for me at all. I didn't enjoy it. We shut it off. We agreed and shut it off after an hour. So I don't know. Not a dog. I love dogs. I have a dog. Love her. Didn't love the movie Dog.
That's funny. And I think I don't know, for me, like stopping a movie with no intention to continue it is a big deal because like it's not something that I'm capable of doing. I need to know what happens. So I'm not sure if that's the case for you, but that sounds like a very much I don't know what the opposite of a ringing endorsement is, but it sounds like that.
Well, so I am usually a completist on stuff like that, but Rose, my wife, is not. If she doesn't want to invest further time in something, right? There's kind of some was it called sunk cost
Yep.
theory in there. Um, but yeah, if I were by myself, I probably would have finished it. But Rose was like, "What is this? What are we doing?" And I agreed. I was like, "This isn't good, actually." So we just popped on New Girl instead. Back on that. Um, but yeah, that should do it for today. We appreciate all of you listening, whether you're on YouTube or a podcast app. We ask that you please subscribe, leave a review or a comment or a thumbs up or anything. Anything helps. And stay tuned for more Knicks coverage throughout this season. We'll have more content dropping soon. Until then, hey, let's go Knicks.
Next tape.